So we're holding page 14 in Tanya Kadisha, in the Holy Tanya. We're on the fifth line, the third to the last words, Ki haseichel shebenefesh. So let's just recap. In chapter 1 of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe introduced to us that every year there's two neshamas, what he calls a nefesh likis and a nefesh abamis, or nefesh abamis, nefesh likis. Nefesh abamis is explained in chapter 1 in Tanya. Nefesh likis is explained in chapter 2 in Tanya. That's who the person is, right? The etzem ha'odam is the nefesh, the drive. Then there is the faculties of the individual, the tools, the instruments, so the faculties are discussed in chapter 3, which we're in the middle of learning now, and chapter 4 will be about the instruments. What did we learn so far about the faculties? That there are two sets of faculties. One is called seichel, and one is called midos, intellect and emotions. Within seichel, we have three components: chochma, bina, das, with concept, comprehension, and concentration, or more classically interpreted as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And the Alter Rebbe spends quite a bit of time in the chapter talking about chochma and bina. And this is where what we started to learn, that chochma is the nekuda, the geometric point, which everything comes from it, but it in its own state is not yet developed, and bina is the development. And that is why, if you break it down, the comparison would be to a father and a mother, an av v'aim. And as we learned towards the end of last year, v'hein heim, av v'aim, v'hein heim, referring to chochma and bina, are the father, which is the chochma, the nekuda, the drop of semen. V'aim is the mother who develops the drop through the gestation period, developing a child, an offspring. What's the offspring? Ava, yira, love for God and fear for God. And we're going to talk about that. I do want to correct myself on something that I said, which was wrong. And that's on top of page 14, when we learned, the first words on the page. The seichel within the human soul, shehi hamaskil kol davar, which intellectualizes everything. And it's nikra b'shem chochma, it's called chochma. So I explained in last year that this refers to the nefesh hasichlis, the intermediary drive and soul between the godly soul and the animal soul. And that is wrong pshat in Tanya. In Tanya here, this nefesh hasichli, this nefesh hamaskeles is another way of saying nefesh olikis. Why? Why must we say that? Because chapter 3 in Tanya is talking about the faculties, Yonason, of the nefesh olikis. Later in Tanya, we have where it discusses the faculties of the nefesh abamis. So we are now in the nefesh olikis mode. You follow? So it doesn't refer to the nefesh hasichlis, the human intellectual soul, which over there is really the seat of free will, as I discussed last year. No, that's not what we're talking about here. Why the Alter Rebbe doesn't use the word nefesh olikis here, I don't know, but possibly it's because he wants to explain the whole idea of seichel. So therefore, instead of saying nefesh olikis, if he would say hine seichel shebenefesh olikis, it only will confuse one more. If he says hine seichel shebenefesh hamaskeles, and nefesh hamaskeles does refer to the nefesh olikis, it jives, it coincides with seichel. Hine ha-seichel, the intellect, within the nefesh hasichlis, within the nefesh hamaskeles. Nefesh hamaskeles. What's the name of the third soul that I told you last time? That's called nefesh hasichlis. He doesn't say here the words nefesh hasichlis. He says nefesh hamaskeles, and which refers to the nefesh olikis. The nefesh olikis, when it utilizes its seichel, so the first process is chochma, then bina, and then leads to the midos. I just wanted to clarify. I looked into this over Shabbos, discussed it with someone, and that's the literal pshat in Tanya. Could we extrapolate like I did the other day? Possibly, but that's not pshat in Tanya. So I don't want to give wrong pshat. I want you to know the pshat in Tanya. If by extension you want to kind of philosophize and intellectualize and talk about the issue as it would apply to the nefesh hasiklis, the third intermediary soul, possibly we could talk about that the way I explained last year. But b'pashtus, that's not the pshat here in Tanya. Okay, now let us continue on the fifth line, the third word from the last word on the line, ki. Ki haseichel shebenefesh hamaskeles, and again here, Avi, the language is exactly Avram like he said on line number 1. Look, haseichel shebenefesh hamaskeles. The same 3 words. So the seichel within the nefesh or likis, but the nefesh or likis as it's using seichel, as it's using intellect to comprehend God, kishim is boinin, when it contemplates, umaymit me'oid, and when it delves deeply into the concept of gedulas Hashem, the greatness of God. In what way is great God? The Alter Rebbe says in 3 different ways. Number 1, Eichu, how God is, Mimalit kol almin, he pervades all worlds. Number 2, V'soivev kol almin, he encompasses all worlds. And number 3, V'kulei kamei, and everything before him, kilo, is like naught, chashiv, considered. Here, the Alter Rebbe puts it all together, but later in Tanya, chapter 48, 49, the Alter Rebbe over there elaborates more of the difference between Memala and Soiviv. But let me give you just a basic, meaning, which is for all of Chassidus. Memala kol almin is the energy, the flow of godliness into the world as it's catered towards each individual, each thing in the world. In other words, it's the energy of Hashem that's, for Avram has his energy, and Hillel his, and mine, etc., etc. And every item, the fan that is above Hillel's head I see now, and Avi's get cabinets, everything has its individual chayis. And they're not the same, they're all different. That's memali, right? What does the word memali mean? To fill. The amount of water that you put into an 8-ounce glass compared to a 10-ounce glass are 2 different amounts. Why? Because 8 ounce can't handle 10, and 10 can handle not just 8, but 10. So there's a different amount of water in each. Why? Because the keli, the vessel, ascertains how much oil should be there, how much energy, in this case, how much water should be there. So too, this level of godliness is one, when we say it fills, I use the word pervades, it means it decides how much chayas to give based on who this person is and what the situation is. Therefore, that's the amount that you're going to get. That's called b'mali. Number 2, we have soivev kol almin. Soivev literally means surrounds, like sviva, svivivon, right? A circle, which implies it doesn't pervade, but somehow, Yonason, it impacts. It makes an impact on Almin, on the worlds, on the universe, but not in a pervading way, but kind of from the outside, right? The example I've given you many times is the principal comes in to the class, everyone rises. The principal's not teaching you anything at the time. Your teacher is teaching you. Your teacher is giving you the information. When your teacher comes in, you don't necessarily stand up. When the principal comes in, you rise. Why? Because you know the principal is the principal over all the teachers. Makif. Right? He doesn't, so that the teacher is the one that pervades you. The principal surrounds you. Nevertheless, there is an impact from the principal, being that the principal is so respected. Therefore, everyone stands up. So in other words, so too in our moral, the Oyer Eliki, the energy of Hashem, that is called Soivev Kol Almin, is such an energy that it makes an impact, but it makes an impact in a very different way. And the value of each, and the comparison is another discussion, not for now. But that's the second idea of Seivim Kol Almin. Then we come to finally the third idea of Kulei Kamei Kilo Choshev. All is naught, all is like naught. It says Kilo, right? It doesn't say Loi. Hillel doesn't say Kulei Kamei Loi Choshev. The language is Kula Kamei Ki Loi. Why? Because there's even a higher level that the Alter Rebbe doesn't talk about here in Tanya, or right here. Which is not everything is like naught, everything is naught. But I don't want to, again, discuss that difference now. That requires a separate shear. What he does say is, what is the third level, Avi? In Memale and in Saivev, right? What do we say? Memale Kol Almin. In other words, the world is there, and the world is important, and this energy pervades the world. Or Saivev Kol Almin. Again, the world is there, and the world is important. But the manner in which this level of God's influence impacts the world is in a way of Saivev, encompassing. But in both scenarios, Avram, the Almin, the world, is choshuv, is important. And it's important means it has its own, in a way, its independent importance. Comes along the third level of God, where the world loses its importance and it's like naught. And that's why we don't say Almin. Kulei Kamei Kilo Choshev. Over here, the focus is not on Almin, on the world. We don't even mention Almin. Kamei. Here the focus is on him. Everything is before him. Because here the level of godliness is so powerful that the impact on us, of course it's on us, the impact on us is as though all there is God and nothing else. Take, for example, Yonason, you have a child who has parents. The parents made the child. The parents gave the ability of a child to be here. Nevertheless, as we all know, as fathers and grandfathers, etc., our children, grandchildren are independent. And sometimes they don't even want to know about us. We're not going to talk much about that. In other words, what we created, Hillel, it came from us. It's like you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here if not for a father and a mother. So, who are you? Yeah, go tell it to ourselves and just imagine, really. So, in other words, the way God makes the creation of a child from parents is such that the child has independence, and God made that through the parents. But nevertheless, the feeling from that perspective is I exist. Yes, I credit my parents for making me, but once they made me, I exist. Kula kamei kala choshev is so much deeper. I feel as though I don't exist. Wow. That's how much the bittul, how much this level of godliness impacts the world, that the world says, although I should feel that I exist because you, God, made me, I'm totally subservient to you, kilo choshev, as though I don't exist. And that is a more authentic, a higher level of bittul. So that's the third level, okay? And again, you don't see this in the next part, the rest of the Tanya, in the rest of the chapter where he explains it, but I felt it's important. So the Alter Rebbe says, going back to the context, that when a person is misbaining, contemplates, and reflects deeply, umaymet me'oid, and look at the language here, Avram, it doesn't just say, and he delves, me'oid, deeply, very deeply, right? He goes real, like Yonason said last week about the Nakuda. Yonason said that about Bina. And although I told him that really the emphasis of Hamaka, of depth, is in Das, which we're going to learn about towards the end of the chapter. Nevertheless, over here, he talks about it as part of Bina, because this is Bina, because she is Bainin. When he contemplates deeply so it's a process of contemplation. It's not the process of concentration, you understand, which is Das. It's the process of contemplation. What does he think about? And this is important, especially for those that want to be mizbainin, and everyone should want to be mizbainin. Not an abracadabra, and not a fabrication and baloney. You need to have data. You need to know the material. You need to know what it says in Zoyar and in Kishvi Arizal and in Chassidus. And on that you meditate. Not, I'm going to decide to meditate on what I decide. It doesn't work that way. That's something else. Anyone's free to do anything, but that's not what we're talking about. You're not going to have the experience that he talks about in chapter 3 in Tanya if it's your own meditation. And maybe you will have in your own things, but we're talking here about developing a love for God, an awe for Hashem, where you feel if you didn't learn a day, you didn't daven, you didn't give tzedakah, you feel empty, worthless, because you didn't connect today to Hashem. That can only come through His bonus umaymik bezeh on memale, soivev, or and kolukach kamei. And I think it's very, very important because especially those that have dabbled in meditation over the years and created all kinds of models. What I find, and I'm right now invested in this discussion because I'm studying, Zalman Schachter and his movement and what he did and everything else, and I really feel that this was missing. I really do. And even if he himself knew it and had it, which I'm not convinced he did, but if he did, I don't see that he taught his students this model that the Alter Rebbe says here. And you know why? Because they weren't versed in Likutei Torah, and Tanya. If one they learned maybe a little bit, but do you understand what I'm saying? And if you're versed in those things, you change your life. And you look very differently, and you behave very differently. Okay? In other words, to have a true isbaininus and a true maimik in the mala saiviv and kula kamei, and yet do what you want, it doesn't work that way. It's an oxymoron. You either not just believe, but come to understand that all is God, and if all is God, I'm nothing. So if you're nothing, the Torah says men and women shouldn't be together in this way or that way, etc. You just say, okay, God, I'll do what you want. Not, I'll try to create a new God or a new form. That's when your when your ego gets in the way. And that's why I say, if we meditate and reflect properly on Memala Seiviv and Kula Kamei, there is no way that you're going to walk out creating and making your own version of God. No, God gives everyone free will. Everyone can do that. But what I'm saying is then you're missing the proper way of His abundance. And it's today, I don't know, it's not so popular. The 60s and 70s, as we discussed last week at the Shiurim, this was much more popular, and it was the right time for this whole sugya. Today, now, so many years later, I think we're more settled, All the beatniks of the 60s and 70s have settled down, and they understand that they need a family and to make some money, and now they talk a different song. So now is the time to kind of look back, and for the sake of advancement and Hashem and Torah, to correct what needs to be corrected. That it's not to badmouth anyone or to gossip. It's to understand if a certain model worked. And that's one of the questions I'm asking different professors and different people. Did the model of the 60s and 70s, now 50 years later, can you say, did it work? Is it working today? Or did it fail? And it's failing. And if it's failing, no problem. We need another model. We have to take the gem and develop the right model. And there are people like Yonason and others that are trying very hard within the confines of Torah and Chassidus and Hillel and others who are trying to create this model in a way. And I'm thinking a lot about this because there's so many side issues that interfere, and that's the problem. It's like Shlomo said to the Rebbe. I mean, this is what he says. He said, I tried it your way. I tried it the Haredi way, the Orthodox way, men and women separate and all that. And the women ran away and she was lost and she never came back. So he said, I see that it's failing. Okay? Well, number one, the fact is that so many people did it that way, the way the Torah says, and it didn't fail. Number two, who says that the way you did it, the results are positive, even though maybe they became frum and orthodox? There's a lot of issues. So when we study models and development of cultures, I think we really need to be kind of objective, and it's very hard for me as a ingrown, born and bred Lubavitcher, or Shlomo, who came from his world, or Zalman, who came from his world. It's very tricky. It's very tricky that the yesh doesn't get in the way. And the yesh doesn't mean horrible things, that you're a bad person. It just means we have a little agenda. We all have a little agenda. And what we have to look at, I think, is today, did these models work? And if they did, how did they work? And B, if they didn't, how can they be corrected? So it's not about destroying the models, belittling the models. It's about improving the models. And the Alter Rebbe here, I say all this because the Alter Rebbe here just throws in, like, very quickly. He doesn't even explain, Begadlus Hashem. What does Godless Hashem mean? The greatness of God. Everyone else will have his idea, Avi, of what the greatness of God is, the awesomeness of God. So the Alter Rebbe says, I'll tell you what, no, it's not up to you. Memale, Soiviv, and Kula Kamei. And invest yourself in that. Now, what does that mean? Oh, I have to learn about Memale, I have to learn about Soiviv, I have to learn about Kula Kamei, and I have to debate it, and I have to talk it out. Free will and existence and everything else. And when you immerse yourself in that world, really, outside of any agendas, then you come to some authentic results and create the model based on that. Not based on, well, the woman ran away, or the guy says he doesn't relate to it. It doesn't work that way. What I'm saying is, Shlomo might have been right. The woman ran away. I'm not saying that didn't happen. But who says that's the way to determine what the model should be? You understand? If we believe that the Kabbalah, the Arizal, the Zohar HaKodesh, the Rashbi, the Tanya, and other tzaddikim, the Baal Shem Tov, they gave us a model that we believe to be the right model, then we follow that model. And we don't deviate from that model. And it could be done. It could be done. But when you allow outside issues, especially if you yourself in your life have issues and go through issues, then it becomes a big hodgepodge. And So I'm being on one hand, I'm being sympathetic to people I'm talking to from the 60s and 70s who constantly tell me, you don't understand the culture then. You don't understand the world then. And if you would have lived then, you would understand the Shlomo model, the Zalman model, and things like that. And it's true. I mean, I was born then, but I was a young boy, and they, preceded me by 10 years or so, or 10, 15 years. So I'm not technically from the baby boomer generation, but nevertheless, I was around him, both in Morristown, as Yonis can tell you, with his chaverim in yeshiva was full of these type of guys, full. The whole, right, Yonis, the whole base medrash had these guys, so I was exposed to them, I spoke to them, and then in my own training and work. So, and just the other day, two people said to me, says, you're well-meaning, but you didn't taste it. If you didn't taste it, you don't know what it is. And I hear it.
Referring to what?
Referring to LSD trips, and psychedelic experiences, and how would I have reacted if I were to be, and also the whole culture of the 60s, music and culture, and the other area which I don't want to talk about, which you understand, women and all that. It was a whole culture. Now, what the Rebbe, my teachers, taught me is, and the Rebbe spoke about not these things, but he spoke about that there's a Torah way. And the Torah, Leitia Mechlefes, doesn't change. We have to apply authentic Torah to situations, but not to change Torah. This Hillel was one of his main nekudas in 50s. People say that he was, at that time, 55 on, you'll see Sichas, where he spoke a lot about Torah doesn't change, not making compromises. And the word on the street, and if no one can prove this, is that he was referring, to Shlomo and Zalman and people like that were using the model, but changing it a little bit compromising because of various situations. But again, I can't prove it, but it makes sense. Because why Punkt at that time, 55, 56, 57, because those were the years, even before 63 Timothy Leary with the LSD already, it was happening, and then with the assassination of Kennedy. So I hear it, and but at the same time, the Torah establishes the way. And if you learn Tanya, and you stick to Tanya, not you take the Tanya and you apply it to your model as you see your model. No. You take your model and you make it like what it says in Tanya. But men, women, believe me, there were Shluchim, Shlomo Schwartz, Kunin, there were the Schmutkin in Milwaukee. There were people in the field in the 60s. And they retained their religiosity, and they worked with students, and they made Bali Tshuva. So you'll say, well, it's really pittance compared to the hundreds and thousands, and all of that. Hey, one was here, one was there. Everyone, in their area. Shlomo would say, in a tape, he says, when he went to Woodstock, I think, and he saw, I forget the Hillel, what was the name of that guru? Swamachi or something?
Satchidananda.
Yeah. So he said he saw him or someone else, and he said to himself, if the Rebbe, and Shlomo was a Lubavitcher, okay? Shlomo said, if the Rebbe would be here, could you imagine how many thousands of young people would flock to him? And his argument was, why wasn't the Rebbe there, right? Now, it's a very simple why. Because there was men and women all over, and a frum Jew watches his eyes, and it's not a venue where he can be, just on a simple level. So what is he going to do? He's going to stand outside across the street with a loudspeaker. Like, come on, get real. Number two, what was going on there, everyone knows, was, a lot of it was intolerable and not Torahic, not halachic. So you want the Lubavitcher Rebbe to be there. And number three, as a tzaddik, and as someone who did have a vision, and who did see the power of the youth, and he did speak about outreach, and he did send shluchim, he needs to, in a sense, be above it. You have to be above it. You have to direct others. So he's hoping that a Shlomo and a Zalman and a Shlomo Schwartz and the other Orthodox guys that went will, in the appropriate way, do it. And for example, in not Woodstock, but Haight-Ashbury, the famous summer of '69 march, where everyone started to march down to the beach, and everyone knows what was going on there, which was against halacha. Shlomo took his people. This is what I was told. I think I was told this by someone who was on the march with Shlomo. And they started to march down from the house of love and prayer, and instead of going down to the beach, he made a left and he took them away. That's Torah. That's halacha. Because Shlomo understood that if they go down to the beach, he won't be able to stop anyone from doing whatever they're doing. And therefore, he made a quick, kind of halachic to the left. And they went with him to the left. So what I'm saying is, these are things to look at now so many years later, and that we could create a model. Unfortunately, today, we don't have the seekers. We don't have, I'm thinking about I don't think that this model can even work today, because everyone's just about, a nice house, a nice car, a nice wife, money and pleasure. Get the youth to want something spiritual and godly. And I know we say, the Baal Tshuva movement is so strong today, and there's so many yeshivas and all that. But hey, guys, Eish HaTorah, Chabad, they had to, their Baal Tshuva programs have either closed or dwindled. Okay, call a spade. And I just spoke to a Jewish renewal person, and she admitted to me, and I said, it seems to me that by you guys too, there isn't youth. And she says, you're right. We're going to have to evolve and figure out something. Yeah. So the world, whether it's from Jewish renewal, Chabad, Eish HaTorah, everyone that's working with people that want to get closer supposedly to God, they're not finding the people. So, in other words, what I'm saying is, if Shlomo and Zalman and others today, I'm not sure they would. Shlomo with his music would still score, because his music is powerful. But Zalman, for example, I don't think he would have who to talk to. He just wouldn't have who to talk to. They're not interested. Sufism, godliness, ecumenism. Yeah, so maybe he'll find monks and Sufis and Catholics, but in the Jewish kid on college campus. And that's why many Chabad college rabbis there, and we have like 300 Chabad rabbis on campuses today, Baruch Hashem, primarily it's the chicken soup Friday night that the Rebbitzin prepares and serves. That's what talks to them. And a good story, and a good l'chaim at the table, and a good dancing and singing together. And I've asked them, I said, why don't you make these pegishas like what Yodesu and I, these encounters that Chabad made in December, and you had, Manis Friedman and then Zalman Posner and Emmanuel Shachat and Dr. Block and Dr. Chanoka. These were our big scientists and guns, talking to them and debating. I said, why don't you do that today? He says, because they're not interested. There's a handful at Harvard, at Cambridge, at Oxford, at Columbia. but most of the students that we encounter, and therefore, what is our model to get them to marry a Jew? That is the model today that Chabad campus shluchim are primarily interested in, is to create a warm bond between them and the Chabad rabbi and rebbitzin, and then at least to get them will marry a Jew, Orthodox, not Orthodox, a Jewish woman. So it's, that's a major change. Yes, Hillel. Yes.
About 30 some years ago, I did some teaching in South Africa.
Yeah.
And that same year, there was a Rav from Ner Yisrael who went to South Africa some months after I did.
Yeah.
And he told a fascinating story that in the 30s, the Panovitcher Rav was in South Africa, and South Africa was a very assimilated community at the time. And he said his message was just like you're saying. So the important thing is that they marry somebody Jewish. And he said, and if you do that, I promise that another generation will come back.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, do you imagine another generation coming out of this all that's more sort of spiritually inclined?
Another generation coming from the 60s, 70s generation?
No. This was in the 30s in South Africa. If they concentrate on marrying Jews, then another generation would come, and l'chora the 60s and 70s in South Africa had a lot of Bali Tshuva.
Yeah, so I think if they married Jewish and we continue the trajectory that we're on now, there will be more Bali Tshuva, but it will not compare to the 60s and 70s. No. The 60s and 70s, it was a global atmospheric bomb that hit the world. And look, we had a COVID. We had a world pandemic. Come on, look around you. What has changed? Bupkis. Yeah, some people never are not well still from that and things like that. And we're recovering our economy and all that. But look, the travel world is back and beyond. They can't handle. In other words, you would think, Hillel, after a COVID pandemic, which blew us, so, we should be davening and learning all day and saying, who needs so much money? We need God. Bupkis. I live here in Brooklyn, in Borough Park, and I see what they talk about, and I see it's all good. They do a lot of chesed, chas v'sholom, but the interests haven't changed, and now the weddings are back to the $50,000, $100,000 weddings. What has changed? Nothing. So somehow the 60s and 70s, what happened then, you know better than I, made a change. It was a revolution. We don't have a revolution. So therefore, will the results of marrying Jewish help? Yes. Will it create the same potency and intensity of Bali Tshuva? Not the way it was. But it doesn't mean to say that it can't happen. We have to all find somehow, without having a 60s and 70s, counterculture revolution or a pandemic, chas v'sholem. We have to kind of find a way of reaching the youth and understanding them and teaching them from child, what they should be looking for. And this is both in the Orthodox world and in the non-Jewish world, in every world, that there's something deeper than just gashmias. We're really materialistic. I live here, and I was in Eretz Yisrael, and the more you live in America, you say, wait, how can I go to Eretz Yisrael in a little apartment? Not that I have a big house, but I want to come for Pesach. I'm coming for Pesach. My daughter doesn't have place for me. She's on the 4th floor of a building in Tel Aviv with 3 bedrooms and 3 kids, Kanei Nahara, and there's no room. I'm going to find a place. What I'm just saying is, I don't have to tell you, Hillel, what you gave up. You shared it with me, from your house and your property, whatever, your building and all that in Baltimore. It's much different. Are there people making big money in Eretz Yisrael in the high-tech field? Yeah. Are there millionaires with unbelievable housing in Herzliya on the water? Yes. But the average person who will be able to afford in America a larger house, a second car, and things like that, no. Most of you guys don't have even cars, as far as I know, right? It's not because, it's just, the price of car, the price of gas, where am I going to park it, and tickets, and police. It's a headache, a kopdreish, Here, in Florida, I say I hate driving in New York, right, because of the roads and the traffic, but in Florida, wide roads, 5 cars parking in the driveway, on the street. It's a machaya. It is. It really is a machaya. But you don't have the ruchnias of Eretz Yisrael. So here's the question. What's your paradigm? The ruchnias or the gashmias? And this is us, from Yidden, Hasidim, Lubavitchers. This is us. This is not they. It's us. And until there's a shift in this way of thinking, so I don't see the same results. Good results, but not the same results. That's my long-winded answer to your question, Hillel.
Good. It's a good answer.
Okay, Chevra, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Have a great Tu B'Shvat, only B'suras Tova. Sei gesund, everyone.